Financial Survival Network, helping you to survive and thrive in the new economy. Get our complimentary newsletter at financialsurvivalnetwork.com. This is the Financial Survival Network.
You are listening to the financialsurvivalnetwork.com. I'm Kerry Lutz on 1230 WBZT. Well, you're probably familiar with Michael Woody O'Brien. He is a gentleman farmer, been on here before, and we're talking now, where is the Steve Jobs of the farming revolution? Because with increased population, demand for food, if we don't find the Steve Jobs soon, forget about 10,000 people dying a day of starvation. We're looking at hundreds of thousands of people per day dying in another 20 or 30 years. Michael, it's great to have you back, or I should say.
Hey, great to be with you, Kerry. Always enjoy our time together.
Hey, me too. So you know, you kind of escaped the tyranny of the rat race. Now you've got your own farm, and you were telling me that products from your land are now appearing in Michelle Obama's farmers markets and going for top dollar.
Well, they're probably all gone now, but for a couple of weeks ago, we had some terrific organic potatoes that one of my community farming groups called Liberty Root. They were growing root vegetables, carrots and onions and beets and potatoes. And the interesting thing is they were all very libertarian congressional pages and staffers and lobbyists and a couple of other, young DC yuppies. And they come out here every couple of weeks and had an acre on the farm that they were just kind of learning about farming with. And at the end of it, they produced some terrific vegetables, including ones that were sold down there in DC for a pretty penny at the Michelle Obama organic market.
And there's a delicious irony to that. And delicious, I mean it in taste-wise and Schadenfreude-wise as well.
Well, to have organic farmers sell something in the DC free market run by Michelle Obama, yeah, that actually is kind of funny if you think about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's like they're libertarians. And, the other thing, Woody, is that the products that you grow on your farm actually have some nutritional value. And it's something in my latest incarnation, I don't want to call myself a health food zealot because I'm not. I still will eat some pizza and junk food on occasion, but I've gotten way away from it. I'm really eating mostly vegetables and fruits. That's the primary source of my nutrition these days. And that's the thing, most of what people consume in the West now has no nutritional value whatsoever, right?
Well, it's not just that it has no nutritional value, but I think you have to look back over this over a long period of time, like 100 years. And you think back 100 years ago, one person in 20 got what we now call cancer. Today, 2 out of 3 people get cancer in their lifetime, 1 out of 3 dies. And the primary difference is exposure to chemicals. And, we're not all working in steel mills anymore, so we're getting chemicals through the food. And to me, it's not just that most food that you buy in a grocery store or Walmart doesn't have any nutritional value or it's genetically modified. It's full of chemicals and preservatives that a little tiny bit at a time, 1 fraction of a gram at a time over your lifetime, basically becomes a guarantee that not just you're going to have cancer, but you're going to probably have other health problems at all. Personally, I'm now as close to 100% organic food as you can probably be. Every now and then I go to some fundraisers and they've got regular food, or I'm on the road and I have to eat regular food. But I would say in 5 years, I've lost the better part of 50 pounds by being completely organic and chemical free. And the one thing I would tell people is the greatest advantage to organic food is nothing to do with the food, is that when you get all that soup of chemicals out of your body, you're going to start to notice your memory is getting better. Your brain is a little sharper. Your ideas are a little crisper because the chemistry in your brain doesn't have food preservatives in it anymore.
I've noticed that myself. I'm primarily organic. I mean, one of my main nutritional sources now is nuts. I really didn't eat much nuts before. Nuts are the kind of thing that you really don't need much pesticides for, much chemicals for. they pretty much are naturally resistant to bugs and to blight, and you just don't need to really tamper with them much. They just grow on their own. You don't need to give them much fertilizer, and there are certain fruits and vegetables that are the same thing. Now, you were mentioning you've come up with some innovative ways to keep predators, to keep animals, and to up your yields in your farming endeavor, right?
Yeah, that's right. Our farm here is very experimental. We're always willing to kind of think outside the box and try new things. Here in the eastern part of West Virginia, near Shepherdstown, West Virginia, I live in a county where there's lots of affluent people and not enough hunters. So we have deer and turkey and wild animals of all sorts. And the deer is really a problem with crop damage. So I tried something that I saw when I was a kid, and everybody told me it wouldn't work, which is we found a spot behind one part of the experimental fields of the farm, and we put a salt lick, a mineral lick, bales of hay, and troughs of water. So the deer would come out of the woods at this one spot, and here would be what we call the Love Aleutian Buffet, where they would lick the salt licks and the mineral licks, maybe have a little bit of hay if there wasn't anything around. They'd drink some water, and they'd kind of look at each other and go, hey, I'm not really hungry. They'd go back into the woods and go to somebody else's farm. Now, in other places of the farm where we didn't do that, the deer destroyed half of the crops. In other parts of the farm, the primary problem was groundhogs. And I would say the solution to that was lead. And I would say I try every day to figure out how it is Adam Kokesh was in jail for something I do every single day, which is load a shotgun. Fortunately, I'm doing it in West Virginia where there's open carry and shooting groundhogs. He decided to pick a less desirable zip code.
Yeah, like Washington, D.C.?
Yeah.
Well, it seems to me there's a lot of open carry in Washington, D.C., just not around the Capitol and the White House.
Well, if you have a government paycheck down there and you're involved in the security apparatus, I guess open carry is almost a job requirement. But for anybody who just worries about the private sector muggers, I heard this morning that Adam Kokesh is finally out of jail, which is wonderful. But it is one of those things that makes you go, what kind of country is this that 90 miles away, I can load a shotgun twice a day and walk around my farm, and I'll never see any law enforcement person question me about that. And he's been in prison for doing that for a substantial period of time, and in a place where the Supreme Court has already said so we can have a gun.
Yeah, and it's crazy. I'm down here in Florida, where shall issue state, but no open carry, obviously. Even in Texas, there's no open carry. And, it's a little twisted what's happened to our Second Amendment. But these groundhogs, they're kind of intractable, aren't they? And how do you get rid of them besides shooting them?
You know what? That's your only avenue, is to shoot them, and you have to shoot them with a purpose. And the reason is, if you see one groundhog, the way they multiply literally like rabbits, that one groundhog could be a dozen groundhogs in 6 months. So your only option is to get out and work them every day and try and figure out where the holes are. And I know there are people who drop stuff down the holes and try and explode them out or poison them out. And I would say that's not as organic as the 12 gauge solution. But if you have a small farm, you really have to keep at it, because if you grow something they want to eat, they're going to be out there all through the night taking your crop down.
What about the canine solution for those groundhogs?
I would just tell you, it's a very rare dog that can have the stones to run one down, pick it up, and shake it to death. And frankly, I think that's a little dangerous for the dog and not very humane for the groundhog versus the 12 gauge. Or actually, I've had an AR-15 solution to a couple of them that were a little further away.
That's a little extreme there, Woody.
I actually hit one at over 200 yards by anticipating which way it would jump, and I said to my wife after that, I should never shoot a gun again, because that's the best shot I'll ever make in my my life. Just a little bit of Irish luck there.
A little bit of Irish luck. But the Jack Russell Terrier, they have been bred to go after these. They call them ratters. I would think they would be pretty effective going after the groundhogs.
I've heard that from some other people, but I hate to say this, but I'm a little biased against Jack Russell because when I used to live up in Pennsylvania, my neighbor had one, and it was figured out a way to jump over my 5-foot pool fence and circle around my pool, and I was always afraid it was going to get in the pool and drown. So I think I'm more of a laid back kind of dog, and the Jack Russells they're a little too high personality for me.
Yeah, I know. I had one, and I don't even want to bore you with the horror stories of we call them the terrorist, the Jack Russell terrorist, because they are neurotic and they're crazy and they run away, and every time he ran away, I half hoped he would never come back. On the other hand, if he didn't come back, it would have been a tragedy. But that's the Jack Russell Terrier. But they're bred for that purpose of getting the rodents out of your life. And
well, if I ever lose my eyesight to shoot them, I'll have to get one.
Yeah. Well, you got to get a few of them. That's the problem. Jim Sinclair is a big Jack Russell fan, but onto the stock market, which we're going to talk about next, because next to farming, that's your other passion, where it's heading, what's going to happen to the earnings of these blue chips, and what you need to buy, and how you make your money. Up next on the financialsurvivalnetwork.com, 1230 WBZT.
Hi, it's Kerry Lutz. I recently decided to move my retirement account into physical precious metals to hedge against the coming times. If you want to move an existing retirement account into physical precious metals that you can hold in your hand, tax-free, there's no company that can do it more quickly and efficiently than Regal Assets. It took them just 24 hours to open my new IRA account, and all I had to do was fill out one simple form. The best part is that Regal Assets does all the work for you. They cover the setup and administrative costs for 2013. If you're interested in making the same move I did, call 855-678-6620, 855-678-6620. That's 855-678-6620, or visit them at regalassets.com. You'll be glad you did, and tell them Kerry sent you.
And we are back with Michael Woody O'Brien, and on the financialsurvivalnetwork.com. I'm Kerry Lutz, 1230 WBZT. So, Woody, the Dow, it just keeps going on and on. One of our good friends and master forecaster, I didn't mean to rhyme that. I don't usually talk in prose, but Martin Armstrong. Now, he is one of the best forecasters out there in terms of cycles. I'm not saying he's always right, but he's been pretty right about gold and silver. He's been pretty right about the markets. He said that sometime in October, okay, so we're at the first third of November, that the Dow was going to break 16,000, and that sometime around the beginning of 2015 it would go to 32,000. And hey, I haven't looked at the Dow today, but as of yesterday, it hit a new record, 15 nominal record, mind you. We always have to be specific about that, but it broke 15,700 yesterday, down a little bit today. What's your thought on that? I mean, it's today.
Obviously, quantitative easing is really driving the blue chip sector of the American market because, the Fed buys bonds in the open market, and that money has to find a place to sleep at night. Nobody wants to hold dollars paying almost nothing in the bank, so it defaults into stocks, especially blue chip ones that pay decent dividends. I think the question of how high the stock market will go is the wrong question, and the question people ought to be asking themselves is, what would the Dow and S&P 500 be if there was no quantitative easing? Because in effect, this artificial steroid injected on a daily basis 80 billion a month if you believe them, probably a couple hundred billion if we knew the real truth. If this is the only thing that's holding up stock prices, that's a problem. Because as Ayn Rand once said, you can ignore reality, you just can't ignore the consequences of ignoring reality. The reality is that most big companies, on average, their top line revenue is starting to slow down. And the only way they're going to be able to have real good growth numbers going into the future is by cost cutting and layoffs and other types of things, because we're at a point where can you push the envelope really further? We're living in a zero growth economy where almost nothing is growing in an organic way. Say, for example, the way Tesla Motors is growing in a very organic way. If you believe the GDP and growth numbers that the government puts out, I have a bridge I want to sell you. The only real numbers about the economy that I believe are from John Williams and Shadow Stats, and what it is my eyes can see in the part of the country I'm in. And I'm actually in the part of the country around D.C. and Northern Virginia where the economy is good because there's so much government money that's spending. But the further you get away from that, you get out into West Virginia and Northern Virginia like Winchester and into Pennsylvania and into Western Maryland, where you don't have as many commuters with government paychecks. You see small businesses closing, small businesses struggling, coffee shops, restaurants not making any money. The further you get from New York and Washington, the worse the real economy out in the heartland is. And I think at some point in time, if you're a money manager, you have to look at these stock indexes that are very, very high, recognized without quantitative easing, they could be a third to half of what it is they are now, and then start to look through the whole commodity index. And you say, I could buy a coffee ETF, and coffee is where it was in the early 90s. I can buy grains. I can buy gold. I can buy coal. I mean, Obama's not going to be president forever. Coal is going to come back in a big way. You can buy a whole range of things, including real estate, including farmland. Commodity prices and prices of real assets are unbelievably low relative to the price of blue chip assets. And I think people are eventually going to say, well, I'm going to put stops under my blue chips and I'm going to start to sell a little and start to buy these things that are ridiculously priced. My favorite one right now is coffee, because unless the descendants of Juan Valdez are going to start farming coffee for free, eventually coffee prices have to go up in a world where 6 or 7 million new people every month enter their coffee drinking years, and the average coffee farmer is approaching 70 years old. But we're going to have higher coffee prices. It might take 5 or 6 years, but we could have a 300 or 400% rebound in coffee prices. I don't think there's any chance the S&P 500 is going to go 3 or 4 times higher unless we hyperinflate our way to QE and somehow that money continues to go into the stocks. So I think at some point you have to rationally look at the price of real things, the price of assets that if you drop them on your foot it would hurt, and compare that to all the fluff in these blue chips and say it's time to start to diversify way beyond bullion.
And that's a good question, because what you're talking about here, Woody, is a world that's rational, where markets behave in a rational fashion. And when you have QE2, when you have a government that pumps in, that they admit to pumping in $85 billion a month, but the fact is all these bonds that they buy put out dividends, I should say interest, and prepayments, refunding, their prepaid interest and all that stuff. You know what I'm saying? They're paid off early, mortgage-backed securities. Easily, it's in the 100+ billion, and could easily be in the 150 billion. They could easily be buying 150 billion a month, and no one would know the difference, right? So,
well, how would we know the difference if one morning China woke up and told the Fed it was going to dump all of its bonds, and the Fed just said, let us write you a check.
Make our day. Yeah, we'll love it. Please
we'll write you a check and we'll stick the bonds in a drawer. The markets are so manipulated and so unorganic. it's really is a crapshoot kind of a casino. But I will tell you with the greatest degree of certainty I can say anything, we will eventually in time, in a post-collapse world, have some kind of organic financial markets that has real price discovery. Do we have it now? No. All we have is the manipulation of everything by computers and high-frequency trading of Goldman Sachs. But as Yogi Berra once said, enjoy it while it lasts, kid, because it never does. And this degree of manipulation cannot continue. It's unsustainable.
Absolutely. And Yogi Berra also said it ain't over till it's over, and it ain't over yet. And I mean, I agree with you, but
well, wait. Let me speak to that for a second, because I think there's an awful lot of people who are astounded by how well this QE keeps kicking the can down the road and postponing a day of a reckoning versus, say, 2008. If we had just let it all collapse and let all the bad debt wash out to sea, we'd be in the third or fourth year of recovery now. The fact is you have to give kudos to Ben Bernanke and the Federal Reserve, because these people aren't rank amateur counterfeiters. These are master counterfeiters. These are master criminals who literally gave $16 trillion away to foreign corporations and banks. And if it wasn't for the wonderful work of a now dead reporter from Bloomberg, we wouldn't even know about it.
And who is that reporter?
I don't remember his name off the top of my head. There is so much going on behind the scenes. I'm a big fan of Matt Taibbi. I think he's
same here.
He's done real journalism about this. But you have to understand is that the banks and their control of the government, the security state, the media, it's absolutely massive. And every now and then you'll see the poker tells get loose. My favorite one recently is, remember how big the march against Monsanto was around the world? It was gigantic. The weekend that happened, you couldn't find anything about it on Barron's, anything about it on the Wall Street Journal, anything about it on Financial Times of London, anything about it on BBC, anything about it. You couldn't even find anything about it on Fox News. And you go, here are news organizations in the financial sector that have a fiduciary duty, in addition to the journalistic duty, to tell what's about the biggest protest in the history of this rock for a huge corporation. And there's not a word about it anyplace. And you just go,
nada.
You know what? If I'm ever in trouble, I want Monsanto's PR agent. This is a perfect example of the power of our bankstocracy, that it's very, very difficult to find the truth about what's going on.
You're so right. But let's get back to this. So it's been going on for quite a while now. I mean, the manipulation's always been present. You and I both know this. But it's running out of steam here, right? It can't go on forever. And we're getting to a point where we're getting to diminishing marginal utility, as they like to say, if you're an economist, but for a normal person like you and I, diminishing marginal returns, where for every dollar you put in, you keep getting less and less out of it. So it's going to stop, right? We're going to get to the point it can't happen anymore. And that day is rapidly approaching. And everybody wants to know, well, when's that going to happen? When's that going to happen? And of course, you and I can't say, well, it's going to happen on March 13th, 2015, because, eventually that day is going to roll around, and then people are going to say, but Woody said it was going to be March 13th, 2000, and then you're going to be laughed at.
Well, I would say, Kerry, you could go back to the hundreds of interviews and YouTube videos that I've done. And the one thing I always tell people, you will never find one where I will say the year or month it will happen. And the reason is we don't know how talented these criminals are yet. We'll know when it's over. But the question of when this will happen, what will be the triggering event, what will happen, these are all terrible questions. People shouldn't ask themselves these questions at all, because when it does happen, there's only one question that's going to matter in people's lives and the lives of their family.
Exactly.
Which is, the question is, are you ready?
Exactly.
If you're ready, you're going to have a pretty good life for the next 5 or 10 years.
You're going to have a great life.
Yeah. If you're not ready, you are going to be living in a world of hurt. I have to tell you, my biggest worry 2 years ago was I going to be living at the farm before this happened? Now that I'm here, I feel as safe as a baby in its mother's arms because I'm greatly prepared. I've got 3 wells and hand pumps and ways to get wells without electricity. I have solar and backup power and storable food. I'm not just ready for myself. I'm ready to be able to take care of my neighbors who I know who aren't preparing. But the truth is most people, 95% of the population, doesn't even have an extra package of toilet paper if something goes wrong. And they're worried about when's it going to happen so I can buy gold the day before. To me, that is absolutely absurdity. It doesn't matter when it's going to happen. It doesn't matter what the triggering event. All you have to do is it's inevitable and you better get ready. It could be tomorrow. It could be 5 months from tomorrow. Tell me how smart Ben Bernanke and Janet Yellen really are. Tell me how well these people can keep this plane in the air with no fuel before it crashes. And it's going to crash.
Well, yeah, it's got to crash. Obviously, you know it. I know it. It's going to happen, right? It's going to happen.
Well, you know, Kerry, I just had a wonderful experience here on the farm, which taught me more about monetary theory than any other experience of my life. I had a friend of mine who was out who said, "Hey, Woody, do you know that's a black walnut tree? Those are worth a lot of money." And I thought, no, I don't know anything about what kind of tree is different from another kind of tree. So this young gentleman went through my farm and he did an inventory of the 20,000 or so trees I had. And here it turned out several hundred of them were incredibly valuable. Red oaks and maples and cherries. Some of them were like furniture grade trees. I had some trees that were over 100 feet tall. One of them was almost 150 feet tall. And they were what were called veneer furniture grade. And we had a logging company come out. And he literally looked at me and said, "These trees have grown to the point that the tops of them are dry because the water can't get that far from the ground through the roots." Wow. He said, all you need is a good storm, and these trees are organically going to fall. And when they fall, their furniture value is going to be ruined based on the way they'll fall and break.
Better chop them now.
But so we ended up cutting down 25 to 30 trees that we sold for about $11,000. And, it upset my wife. I would say we're both kind of hippie tree huggers. But, you have to realize you can't grow anything to the sky. Eventually, it's going to collapse under its prior weight of all of its growth.
I knew there was a metaphor in this story here, Woody.
You either are going to do it with a chainsaw and get something out of it, or you're going to let it fall and destroy everything around it and knock down many other trees that have decades or more of life. And this is exactly how our dollar Ponzi scheme has operated for the past 100 years, especially since August of 1971. And as I say all the time, if Richard Nixon can take us off the gold standard with a stroke of a pen, why couldn't a president now put us back on it with the stroke of a pen?
Well, the theory being, and I don't want to rain on your parade, is there ain't no gold in Fort Knox, but there's one guy who I trust, Ross Hansen. Say whatever you want about Northwest Territorial Mint. They're good people there that I can tell. And he says the people he's talked to says the gold is there. Who has claims on it? I don't want to get into that whole thing because that's how many angels can dance on the head of a pin, and I think an infinite number can, but you can have your opinion.
Well, let me suggest an alternative to that, the whole Fort Knox thing. I think there is as much gold and silver in private hands in the United States as there ever was in Fort Knox.
Exactly.
In physical possession by people. And you know what? Barack Obama can announce a gold standard at $50,000 an ounce tomorrow, where I could walk into a branch of the U.S. Treasury, hand them an ounce of gold, and they'll hand me a gold-backed note for $50,000. And I got to tell you what, in no time, if Fort Knox is empty, in no time it will be filled up, and we'll have a rational money supply based on real gold. The fact that the government doesn't have in its possession debt-free gold to do it doesn't mean that it can't offer people who have physical bullion a good enough price that will turn it down. As I always say, I would be happy to do that tomorrow and buy more farmland and feed more people. My only concern about going back onto a gold standard, and that really is the Franco-Harris Hail Mary pass of monetary policy. Everybody who says, oh, they would love it if gold would go to thousands an ounce and silver would go to hundreds an ounce. And I always say, well, you might love it until the following week when milk would be $50 a gallon and gasoline would be $60.
And it'll crash the economy instantly overnight.
I'm not sure it would happen overnight, but I have to tell you something. If the dollar is worth a fraction in gold what it used to be, people who make real things are going to want more money for them, and that eventually is going to be potentially very destructive.
No, the economy will shut down overnight. Inevitably has to, because it's a simple matter, and the end of entitlement programs, because you won't be able to just print money at will. It's the end of it.
As much, Kerry, as I don't like talking about what could be the triggering event to collapse of the system, I have to tell you, my favorite one of all the scenarios I've heard, because I still think this is the most likely one, is that we face someone in the Soviet Union by the name of Vladimir Putin, who has an ego the size of the Kremlin. And he's accumulating gold and accumulating resources, and he could at any moment say, we are going to have a gold-backed ruble convertible to US dollars at the rate of $50,000 an ounce. And he, as the head of his country, could in effect create a de facto gold standard for all of those dollars. And he could crush the American economy and go down in the Communist Hall of Fame as he could be the Wayne Gretzky of all commies, having collapsed the West without a missile, a tank, or a rifle. And my sense is that eventually he or somebody around him will kind of figure this out. And to me, he is still the most dangerous man to trigger collapse. The Chinese obviously could do that, and they certainly know they could do it. I think, but they don't really have the motive and the ego that Putin has. And of all the scenarios I've heard that could bring this Ponzi scheme to an end, I still think if I had to bet on one of them, it would be that one.
Yeah, the problem is that once you go to a gold-backed currency in any country, the central bank becomes a mere warehouse repository. They give up power. Woody, we got to go now. Just tell us where we find you on the internet, your Facebook page, all that good stuff.
I'm the only Woody O'Brien on Facebook. You can also find me for my investment newsletter, woodyknowsmarkets.com. And my life's work, the end of the Federal Reserve, is at abolishfiatslavery.com.
Hey, we love it. Woody, we'll have you on again real soon. Always a pleasure. Be well.
Great to talk again, Kerry.
Hey, if you're a coffee connoisseur like me, you need to try an amazing new roaster out of LA, Knox Coffee. These guys are fanatical about delivering the best beans in the world. They source directly from the growers, roast it, and ship it to you within 24 hours. So it's the most fresh coffee you've ever tasted. Every 2 weeks, you get a new batch of incredible beans roasted to perfection. If you're hitting a cafe most mornings, this is a much better and more economical way to get great coffee. Tonks is by subscription only, and they're offering you a free sample. Use the URL tonks.org/liberty. That's TONX.org/liberty. Get some for yourself or send it to someone you know who appreciates the finer things. Tonks.org/liberty. Again, TONX.org/liberty.
The Financial Survival Network, helping you to survive and thrive in the new economy. Get our complimentary newsletter at financialsurvivalnetwork.com. This is the Financial Survival Network.